This is the segment where President Trump apparently wants us to be discussing his abuse of weather maps. He must want us to talk about it because he kept tweeting about it today. The president is personally keeping this story alive. The story of him using a defaced weather map to try to prove that Hurricane Dorian could have reached Alabama. Why is he doing this? Why does he so obviously want us to talk about this story? It's a bad story for Donald Trump. But it does seem like it might be one of those deliberate Trump diversions, because the story we turn to now is much, much worse for Donald Trump, and worse in the view of Trump voters. And that is the new information we have tonight about the money Donald Trump is diverting from the Defense Department budget to pay for the wall he promised his voters Mexico would pay for.
I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Yeah. Mark my words. Yeah. Mexico will pay for the wall. Believe me. And who's going to pay for the wall? Mexico, 100%. 100%.
How is the next rally going to feel about chanting the Pentagon will pay for the wall, or we will pay for the wall, or school children of military personnel will pay for the wall? This is a much worse story for Donald Trump than a fake line on a weather map. The Defense Department is diverting $3.6 billion away from 127 military construction projects. Projects in 23 states are being defunded to pay for the wall. 9 of those construction projects are for building or renovating schools for the children of U.S. military personnel. Utah, a state with 2 Republican senators, is losing $54 billion in military funding that will be sent to the wall. Arizona Senator Martha McSally, who has supported the president's emergency declaration that he is using to justify the diversion of military funds, is now watching an Army base in her state lose $30 million to pay for the wall. And that's after the Secretary of Defense had personally assured her that Arizona wouldn't lose any money. Former astronaut Mark Kelly, running as a Democrat for the Senate in Arizona, is already polling ahead of Republican Senator Martha McSally. Mark Kelly now says that Senator McSally, quote, didn't keep her word when she promised to protect funding for Arizona military bases. As local news stories continue to appear in the 23 states that are losing military funding to pay for the wall, no Republican senator has suffered a harsher judgment in the local news media than North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis, who must first survive a Republican primary before entering what will be a competitive general election race for his reelection next year. A Charlotte Observer editorial said the loss of $80 million in military construction spending in North Carolina is, quote, an $80 million punch in the gut and a lesson that Thom Tillis never seems to learn. The lessons here, there are at least a couple. First, don't trust this president. Donald Trump will not hesitate to burn anyone, including people who've previously helped him, to get a political victory. And also, when you buy political favor in exchange for your principles, the bill is always more than you thought it would be. We are joined now by 2 highly experienced political journalists who could surely deliver the best jokes on this program about the Trump weather map, but have agreed to temporarily leave that to the late-night comedians while they concentrate on the issues the president seems to be trying to divert us from. John Heileman's with us. He's a national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. He is co-host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus, and he's one of the truly great writers who has fixed his focus on politics. And we are the better for it. And Sam Stein joins us. He is the politics editor of the Daily Beast, and he is an MSNBC political analyst. Sam continues to deliver some of the most important reporting of the Trump era about what the Trump administration is actually doing with the levers of power in government. I mean that, Sam. I mean that you're the one who goes inside the government in these stories that few of us find the space to cover and tell us what they're really up to. So let's start with you on this question of, he wants us to talk about the hurricane map because What's the thing he doesn't want us talking about? Is it the money for the military money for the wall?
I don't buy the premise.
Okay.
I actually challenge the premise. I think, earlier when I was covering Trump, I probably would have bought the premise, the three-dimensional chess. And I certainly do grant you that the diversion of military funds to the wall is an embarrassing story, if anything, a complete absence of his campaign
for the
promise
entire
right there.
Republican Party.
Yeah, and because they allowed this to go through with the transference of funds. But I've come through observation and reporting to realize that Trump is just sort of clinically incapable of moving on from these things. And to him, there's no greater slight than being perceived as being completely out of touch with reality. And so he's now gone through almost a dozen tweets, proclamation statements written upon maps to prove that he was right about Alabama. And what's particularly bizarre about this, and why I think that this is a very bad story for him in its own right, is that he's doing it all while our country is still dealing with the hurricane. It's not like the hurricane has passed. North Carolina is, about getting hit right now. So it would be one thing if we had gone through this, there was no damage, but he's literally distracted by proving that Alabama was in the crosshairs as North Carolina is dealing with this.
Well, I meant to include this in the premise. I cling to the possibility that it's both. That he is an obsessive, and he has an obsessive behavior that you see all the time. But he's also aware. He's looking at those map segments and going, well, they're not talking about the kids' schools that I'm not funding.
Well, I think this is the right answer, and I will say not obsessive. Pathological is the word you're looking for. He has a pathology. He's a pathological liar. The pathology, however, is triggered by various bad news on other fronts. So the pathology gets amped up when he looks around and sees what? On the domestic political front, he looks at polling, where he's getting beaten like a gong in every swing state by not just Joe Biden, but by many of the further down the scale Democrats. He looks across the ocean. He sees his friend Boris Johnson getting beaten about the face and neck every day.
After just telling us how smart Boris Johnson is.
And then he looks at the economy, where we have news just today, the survey that these certified accountants do of financial industry executives who are more pessimistic about the outlook for the economy than they have been in 3 years. And you've got data coming out that suggests that we have a looming recession. So economic news, political news, foreign news, all bad stories for Donald Trump. And it amps up the instinct for pathological lying.
Let me just say, it's not like this is a particularly savvy effort at diversion.
Did I use the word savvy?
No, but
I'm not the one who said three-dimensional chess, Sam.
I'm just making the point.
I heard you say that
I'm making the point that it doesn't take a level of sophistication to try to divert attention to something a little bit more positive than you ranting about Alabama and writing over maps.
Yeah, what's he got?
Go do a rally somewhere. Leave the Oval Office. Go down to the border where they're building the wall. There are things you could do as the President of the United States to divert attention in much more positive ways, instead of bringing attention to yourself as someone who is incapable of getting over the idea that Alabama may have had gusty winds.
But as Lawrence points out, he just lost the rally chant. What's he going to do? Is he going to go do a rally and the key element of the rally, build that wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it? Can't do that anymore.
He's stuck with the idea that Mexico will end up paying for it. The guy can maneuver through this. He's just, what's remarkable to me is that he's just unable to literally get out of his chair and try to do something else other than tweet and say, look at this map, I drew on it.
Sam Stein gets the last word in this round.
Deservedly so.
Because he really likes the last word.
I was going to say, anytime he wants it.
John Howland and Sam Stein, thank you both for joining us tonight. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.